His name was Wade Wilson, the same name as Marvel's wisecracking anti-hero, the same name that would later flood TikTok with millions of views as strangers obsessed over his face, his tattoos, his cold eyes staring from a courtroom. But this Wade Wilson didn't wear a red suit or crack jokes. This Wade Wilson strangled a woman in her own bed, then hours later ran over another woman so many times her body was unrecognizable. 2 innocent lives erased in a single day by a man whose only superpower was the ability to destroy everything he touched. Before we dive in, if you're interested in the psychology behind cases like this, hit that subscribe button. We're going deep into the criminal mind today, and you won't want to miss what comes next. 370 to 6 days. That's how long Wade Wilson has sat on Florida's death row as of today, waiting for the needle that will end his story. But here's what most people don't know. Wilson specifically requested to be moved to death row as soon as possible after his sentencing. No appeals delay. No fighting. He wanted it. The real question isn't when he'll die. It's how a young man raised in an upper-middle-class home with every advantage, every opportunity, every reason to succeed, became one of Florida's most brutal killers. And why, in a world drowning in true crime stories, did this particular monster capture the attention of millions? Studies show that when killers come from good backgrounds, it violates our fundamental assumptions about evil. We expect monsters to be made by monstrous circumstances. When they're not, it forces us to confront something darker, that sometimes, despite every advantage, something goes catastrophically wrong in the human brain. The answer begins on a humid Florida night in October 2019, when 3 strangers walked into a bar and only one walked out alive. Wade Wilson was born into chaos. His biological parents were children themselves, his father just 14, his mother 13 years old when he came into the world in Tallahassee on May 20th, 1994. They named him Anthony, but they couldn't keep him. 2 teenagers drowning in their own problems had no room for a baby, so Wade was given up for adoption, handed over to Steve and Candace Wilson, a stable church-going couple who already had 2 daughters and plenty of love to give. On paper, Wade won the lottery. The Wilsons were upper middle class, the kind of family that sent their daughters to private colleges to become doctors. Wade had the same doors open to him, a nice house, good schools, family dinners. But something was broken inside him from the start, something that no amount of stability could fix. As a young boy, Wade suffered 4 concussions, from accidents, rough play, and sports injuries. He crashed into a fence playing baseball and obtained a concussion during a football game. In one incident, he was a passenger in a car that went off the highway and crashed into an oak tree. Wilson left the hospital that day against medical advice without being evaluated for a head injury. Here's where it gets complicated. Defense neurologist Dr. Mark Rubino testified that brain scans showed trauma and impairment, concluding that Wilson's behavior was explained by his head injuries, his impulsiveness, his overwhelming emotion that gets acted upon without any kind of checks and balances by the frontal lobe. But the state's medical examiner, Dr. Thomas Coyne, disagreed entirely, saying Wilson's brain scans looked normal and that people do evil things without suffering from brain damage. So who's right? And more importantly, should it even matter? By age 11, Wade told his adoptive parents he felt like he was going crazy. Throughout his younger years, his parents said he was functioning fine, active, went to church, was a good student. After puberty, they noticed a dramatic change. He became reclusive, paranoid, had mood swings, and was disruptive. His mind was a storm he couldn't control, and no one was listening. His family attempted to get Wilson mental health treatment, but he was non-cooperative. It was only through the police that intervention occurred. Wilson was Baker acted at 15 or 16. Think about that for a moment. An 11-year-old boy tells his parents he's going crazy. His behavior spirals. His family tries to help, but nothing works until the police get involved, when it's already too late. By the time he hit his teenage years, the storm had become a hurricane. At Lincoln Memorial Middle School and later Childs High School in Tallahassee, Wade became known as Troubled. quick to anger, always on the edge of violence. He got into fights over nothing, his fists flying before his brain could catch up. His encounters with the law began in 2012 with various incidents, including burglary, assault, and firearm-related offenses. In November 2013, Wilson was sentenced to prison for burglary and grand theft, serving until September 2014. In 2015, he faced charges of sexual battery and kidnapping after a woman accused him of assaulting her. Then came the drugs. Alcohol first, then harder substances, each one pulling him further from the path his parents had hoped for him. The prosecution's expert argued that Wilson's extensive history of drug abuse was a more plausible explanation for his delusions and criminal behavior than any mental illness. Defense neurologist Rubino acknowledged Wilson consumed drugs the night before the murders and added that, combined with his brain injuries, they don't mix well. He said the combination likely resulted in the murders. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Millions of people do methamphetamine. They don't all become killers. His family watched helplessly as the joyful little boy they'd adopted disappeared into a shell of rage and depression. They didn't know it then, but they were watching a killer being born. Fast forward to October 2019. Wade Wilson, now 25, was living in Fort Myers with his girlfriend Mila Montanez, who ran a spa business in the area. Their relationship was a powder keg, marked by explosive arguments and Wade's increasingly erratic behavior fueled by heavy methamphetamine use. On October 6th, that powder keg exploded. After a fierce argument, Wade took Melissa's car from the bar that night and left her stranded, ignoring her calls, ignoring her pleas for him to bring it back. Melissa was furious, but she was also worried. She could sense something was unraveling inside him. She had no idea how right she was. That evening, October 6th, Wade walked into Buddha Live, note, Buddha not Buddha, a bar in Fort Myers, where live music pulsed through the crowd. He was looking for a distraction, a way to kill time and quiet the chaos in his head. That's when he saw her. Christine Melton, 35 years old, out with her friend Stephanie Johnson, just two women enjoying a night of music and laughter. Wade struck up a conversation. He introduced himself as Junior. He seemed charming enough, friendly even. They had no reason to fear him. Wilson also met another man there, Jason Shepard. As the bar closed around 2 in the morning, the group decided to keep the party going. They all went back to Shepard's house where Wilson and Melton were intimate. A few hours later, Melton, Wilson and Johnson went to Melton's apartment in Cape Coral. They were nervous because Wilson couldn't drive the vehicle they arrived in, which was manual, so they called an Uber. Johnson said, "I know Christine and I had a sense of relief that we made it home safely. She stayed for about 15 minutes before leaving." Here's what makes this so chilling. Christine Melton was a kind-hearted waitress from Illinois who had moved to Florida to help care for her mother, Katie, who was battling early-stage Alzheimer's. Christine lived just 4 houses away from her mom, so she could check on her daily, protecting her from scams, making sure she was safe. She was her mother's best friend, her protector. She loved cats, dreamed of becoming a mother someday, and had a quick wit that made everyone around her feel safe and understood. Christine will never experience motherhood, a role she was born to play, her cousin testified through tears. And Wade Wilson strangled her to death in her own bed. Johnson woke up, hungover but fine. She chatted briefly with Christine and Wade, who seemed perfectly normal. Nothing felt off. "Christine would have never let me leave that house if she was scared," Johnson explained. Trusting her friend was in good hands, Stephanie grabbed her things and left, waving goodbye as she stepped into the morning sun. Christine waved back from the doorway, still in her pajamas, smiling. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. Alone with Christine, Wade's mask slipped off completely. As she climbed back into bed for some much-needed rest, he approached from behind. Without warning, without reason, he wrapped his hands around her neck and strangled her with crushing force. Christine fought desperately, her body convulsing, her hands clawing at his grip, but Wade didn't stop. Medical examiner Dr. Noelia Alamar Hernandez testified that Melton was killed by asphyxia due to compression of the neck. It took agonizing minutes for her to go still. The medical examiner later described her face, purple from lack of oxygen, tiny burst blood vessels in her eyes, deep bruises ringing her throat like a nightmare necklace. State attorneys described how Melton's face was black and blue, her fingernails were broken, with marks on her neck. Christine had invited a stranger into her home out of kindness. She died in the bed where she felt safest. This is what psychologists call impression management. Stephanie testified that when she last saw Christine, everything was fine. Wade appeared completely normal just minutes before he killed. He wasn't in a psychotic break, he wasn't out of control, he was choosing to appear normal, which requires executive function, the very thing his defense claimed he lacked. But Wade Wilson wasn't done. He didn't collapse in horror at what he'd done. He didn't call for help or break down in tears. Instead, he coldly rifled through Christine's belongings, grabbed her phone, her purse, her keys, and stole her black Nissan Versa from the driveway. He drove off around 10 in the morning, as if nothing had happened, leaving Christine's body cooling under the covers where her cats would soon curl up beside her. His rampage was just beginning. High on the thrill of what he'd done, Wade drove to Fort Myers to confront Melissa at her spa, Mila Spa. When he spotted her in the parking lot, he pulled up in the black Nissan Versa. Melissa told police Wilson attacked her. Officers responded to 911 calls around 8:50 a.m., reporting a man and woman fighting, with witnesses saying the guy was dragging a woman outside of a business. Montanez testified that Wilson tried to pull her into the car, and when she resisted, he punched, slapped, and choked her. He then dragged her upstairs to her business and held her against the wall by her throat. But when he hit her again, he seemed startled by all the blood, and she took the opportunity to run. In body cam footage obtained by Newsweek, a Fort Myers police officer detained Wilson, who was shirtless and missing some of his front teeth. The officer told Wilson he was being detained because of the battery this morning, but Wilson denied any incident. The officer demanded he turn off the car and give him the keys, but Wilson started the car and drove away. Melissa later testified, "There is no one behind those eyes anymore. Melissa's narrow escape was a miracle, but it meant Wade was still out there, still hunting." Around 1 in the afternoon, Wade circled back to Cape Coral, cruising the streets in Christine's stolen car. That's when he saw Diane Ruiz, 43, walking her usual route to work. Diane was a devoted mother of 2 teenage sons, Brandon Cuellar, 29, and Zane Romero, 19, and a hard-working bartender at the Moose Lodge. She never missed a shift in 5 years. She was known among her co-workers as the heartbeat of the bar. Diane was the heartbeat of the bar, her co-worker Linda Giancola remembered. She always had everybody's back. She just had that personality that was really magnifying. She has this really loud laugh that you could hear it like a mile away. For 5 years, she never missed a shift. She walked the same route every day after dropping off her boys, probably thinking about them, maybe humming a song, just a regular woman heading to work. Wade pulled over and rolled down the window. He asked for directions to a nearby school, his voice innocent, his smile fake. Diane, trusting and helpful, approached to give directions. But as she realized something was wrong and tried to back away, Wade exploded. When Ruiz tried to exit the car, Wilson attacked her, beating and strangling her before pushing her out of the car and running her over 10 to 20 times. Wilson's biological father testified that his son admitted he got back into the car and ran her over until she looked like spaghetti. His hands shot out, grabbing her by the neck and arm, pulling her partially into the vehicle. She fought back desperately, scratching at his arms, trying to twist free, but he strangled her with crushing force while punching her face and body. When her body went limp, he shoved her out onto the grass in an empty lot. But then he saw her chest was still rising. She was still alive. So Wade got back in the driver's seat, shifted into gear, and ran over her body repeatedly. 10 to 20 times, backing up and driving forward, over and over, like he was trying to erase a mistake. Ruiz's body was found 3 days later, on October 10, in a field behind a Sam's Club. The medical examiner's report described her remains as mangled beyond recognition, with massive trauma from the tires crushing her skull, torso, and limbs. Vultures were circling by the time her body was found. Diane's son, Zane Romero, testified that his mother's death happened just days before his debut in the high school marching band, which she was excited to see. Diane's sons lost the mother who never missed a beat. Her fiancé lost a future wedding, the Moose Lodge lost its heartbeat, and all because she tried to help a stranger with directions. After killing Diane, Wade did something that would seal his fate. He called his biological father, Stephen Testaseca, the 14-year-old boy who'd given him up for adoption decades earlier but had recently reconnected with him. High on methamphetamine and twisted pride, Wade bragged about what he'd done. He described in graphic detail how he strangled Christine in her bed and beat Diane before running her over like roadkill. He laughed as he recounted their final moments. Why would a killer call his father and confess? Psychologists who study serial killers note that some perpetrators experience what's called narcissistic injury. They commit these heinous acts partially to feel powerful and important. The confession isn't remorse, it's bragging. It's the ultimate power move. Look what I did. Look how powerful I am. Testaseca was stunned at first, thinking it might be one of Wade's tall tales. But as the calls kept coming, reality sank in. Testaseca and his wife put the phone on speaker and relayed every word to police while keeping Wade on the line. They played along, pretending to help him, asking for his location. Wade, oblivious and arrogant, told them exactly where he was. By evening, Wade had broken into an empty house to lay low. The homeowner was not at the residence and told police that Wilson was not permitted to be inside. Police called the house's landline and a man picked up. Wilson told police he needed to speak to his father, and then he would come outside. While inside, Wilson showered, ate popcorn, drank 5 White Claws, and stole the victim's clothes, which he was wearing when arrested. On October 8th, just 24 hours after the murders, a SWAT team surrounded the house. They burst through the door and found Wade inside, caught red-handed. He surrendered without a fight, his face blank as the cuffs snapped on. The trial began on June 3, 2024, in Fort Myers, and it gripped the nation, partly because of Wade's nickname, the Deadpool Killer, which had gone viral on TikTok, where thousands of users bizarrely obsessed over his appearance despite his horrific crimes. Here's where this case gets truly disturbing on another level. The Lee County Sheriff's Office confirmed that Wilson received 3,903 messages since June 12, the day he was found guilty, plus 65 letters in the mail and 754 photos, 163 of which were rejected due to their inappropriate nature. Let me say that again. Women sent a double murderer nearly 4,000 messages and X-rated photos. Some BookTok users started romanticizing him by posting thirst traps and writing fan fiction, behavior defined as hybristophilia, which sparked backlash. One letter from a woman in California asked the judge to sentence Wilson to life in prison instead of death, writing, "A life sentence would provide his family, along with myself, the chance to maintain a relationship with Wade. It would allow us to visit, correspond, and continue to offer emotional support, a privilege that would be lost with the death penalty." This is hybristophilia, sexual attraction to people who commit crimes, and it's more common than you think. Comment below, why do you think people romanticize killers? What does this say about our society? Robert Melton, Christine's relative, told Newsweek, "A friend of mine sent me a link, like, oh yeah, he's a TikTok sensation," and I'm just like, oh my God. I don't want anything in this to be about him. 2 wonderful people died. This should not end up being about Wade. But mostly the trial gripped the nation because the evidence was overwhelming and the brutality was undeniable. Prosecutors played the chilling recordings of Wade's confessions to his father. They showed DNA evidence linking him to both crime scenes. Surveillance footage captured the stolen car. Autopsy photos revealed the strangulation marks and crushing injuries. Witnesses like Melissa described his violent attack hours before the killings. According to his father's testimony, Wade could not explain his motives beyond, "I just wanted to do it." Wade's defense tried to paint him as a broken man lost to drugs and brain injuries from childhood concussions. They argued he was too impaired to form intent for premeditated murder. But the prosecution demolished that narrative. Wade had shown cold calculation. He'd stolen Kristine's car, attacked his girlfriend, hunted down Diane, then bragged about it all. On June 12, 2024, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Wade Wilson guilty on all counts: 2 first-degree murders, plus grand theft, battery, burglary, and petty theft. The penalty phase followed, and on June 25th, the jury recommended death, 9-3 for Kristine, 10-2 for Diane. Florida had recently changed its death penalty law. Wade Wilson became the first Florida killer to face death under the state's revised death penalty statute. Previously, juries needed unanimous recommendations. Now, only a majority is required. On August 27, 2024, Judge Nicholas Thompson sealed Wade's fate with 2 death sentences, 1 for each life stolen, saying the evidence showed both murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that the second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. As the sentencing was announced, relatives of the victims hugged, sighed, cried, and clapped. Wade sat stone-faced, showing no remorse, no regret, nothing. Today, Wade Wilson sits on death row at Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida. He's housed in a tiny 6-by-9-foot cell where he spends 23 hours a day in isolation. He wears an orange shirt that marks him as condemned, eats bland meals alone, and waits. His appeals are ongoing, and Florida's average death row wait is 13 to 14 years. Some inmates have waited since 1976. While awaiting trial, Wilson contacted Scripps News Fort Myers multiple times. In 2020, he told them that he used to be connected to a high-level human trafficking ring and that he would groom women for them. Wilson claimed the group was framing him for the murders as punishment for trying to leave. Wilson repeatedly claimed he was framed, insisting in letters and brief court comments that he was set up and wrongly accused, and that Melton and Ruiz were murdered by an underground trafficking group. Wilson stated that he only confessed to the murders to protect his family from harm. This, despite confessing in detail to his father, despite the DNA evidence, despite the surveillance footage, despite witnesses. Days after his death sentencing, Wilson also received a 12-year sentence for attempted trafficking in amphetamines or methamphetamines between 28 grams to 200 grams. Wilson got arrested on drug charges while in jail in April 2023 after a K9 detected bags that tested positive for methamphetamine. In 2020, Wilson and his cellmate were accused of tampering with a window in their cell in an attempt to escape. Wilson was reportedly the primary planner and instigator of the escape effort. But here's what haunts me most about this case. Wade Wilson had every advantage: loving adoptive parents, financial stability, educational opportunities. And yet he became a monster who killed 2 innocent women in a single day for no reason other than, as he told detectives, "I would do it again." So, what really happened? Was Wade Wilson a victim of untreated brain damage, a drug addict whose methamphetamine use destroyed his impulse control, a mentally ill person failed by the system, or simply evil, someone who, despite every advantage, chose violence? The answer is probably all of the above. And 2 innocent women paid the ultimate price. Their lives mattered, their dreams mattered, and they were stolen by a man whose name became infamous for all the wrong reasons. Wade Wilson will never be a superhero. He'll only ever be remembered as the killer who shares a name with one. Wade Wilson's story is a reminder that evil doesn't always come from broken homes or desperate circumstances. Sometimes it comes from somewhere darker, somewhere we can't fully explain, and when it does, all we can do is remember the victims, honor their memory, and ensure their killer never sees freedom again. If this case affected you, please like this video to honor Kristine and Diane's memory. Subscribe for more deep dives into criminal psychology.